next speaker, who is getting set up right now, John Swingle, I think is not going to be technical either. I'll hopefully be able to understand it.
Thanks. Where's the clicker? Hi, everybody. My name is John Swingle, and I'm not technical. I'm an attorney, so this will not be a super technical talk. So hopefully you'll be able to follow it. But yeah, so the topic of my talk is smart contracts versus dumb money. So what do I mean by that? Well, you know, Bitcoin came out, and initially it was all about, you know, peer-to-peer electronic cash and how Bitcoin was going to revolutionize money. And then at some point, the narrative shifted, or at least one of the narratives shifted, and it became, you'd hear people say things like, well, it's not so much the Bitcoin that's important, or even cryptocurrency, it's the technology behind Bitcoin that's really exciting, blockchain technology. So instead of, you know, how is Bitcoin going to revolutionize money, it's how is blockchain technology going to revolutionize everything, supposedly. And so you hear people like Andreas Antonopoulos with, you know, the quote, money is just the first app. And of course that raises the question, what is the second app, right? And one possible answer that's been proposed, some people are pretty excited about, is this idea of smart contracts. And so what I wanted to do was sort of take a high-level look at these two use cases, right? Money versus smart contracts. What is money? What are the problems with money? How does blockchain technology address those problems? Similarly, you know, what are contracts? What are the problems with contracts? How do smart contracts potentially address those problems? And then, you know, based on the comparison, what are the possible implications? So first, money. You know. Oh, I'm sorry, my shadow. Sure, thank you. So what is money? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can think about money. Two of my favorite are to think about money as a behavior and money as a ledger. So money as a behavior is just basically the idea of indirect exchange, right? So instead of trading A for B because I have A and want B, I trade A for M, money, because that will enable me to trade for what I actually want. And you know, it overcomes this double coincidence of wants problem, and you know, barter is massively inefficient, and money really solves that problem. And so money as a noun is just that thing that is most associated with that behavior, the most easily bartered for good. And you can see that there's a, you know, the theory of money, that there's a feedback loop, right? Because as something becomes more widely accepted as money, it becomes more useful as money. So greater adoption, acceptance leads to greater utility, leads to greater acceptance. Another way to think about money is as a societal accounting ledger of, you know, value given but not yet received, or you know, equivalently yet to be reciprocated altruism, if you want to get fancy. And you know, it really shouldn't be that hard to conceptualize money as a ledger, because the vast majority of money in the world today exists as nothing other than a literal ledger entry, right? I mean, I get paid by my employer. All that really happens at the end of the day is a number in a bank's computer system associated with my employer's account gets debited, another number associated with my account gets credited. And so what are the requirements for money? Well, you know, a lot of different, you know, you can see lists like divisible, fungible, portable, you know, all those words. And I like to kind of just think about it in terms of three broad requirements that sort of correspond to the three traditional functions of money. There is reliable scarcity, which sort of corresponds to the store of value function. There is low transactional friction, which sort of best corresponds to the medium of exchange. And there is, you know, network effect, widespread acceptability. Only a widely accepted form of money is really suitable for use as a unit of account. And, you know, another note, so the second quality there is low transactional friction, but that's kind of focusing on an individual transaction, because really the entire purpose of money is to reduce transactional friction, right? I mean, that's how you, and so all of the other requirements really ultimately are directed at that goal, like the network effect, widespread acceptability. How does money solve this double coincidence of wants problem? Well, if everybody has money and everybody is willing to accept it, it's not really a coincidence, right? Oh, I have dollars and I want pizza. Papa John's has pizza and wants dollars. What a crazy coincidence, right? I mean, it just it works. And similarly, so scarcity, if a money isn't reliably scarce, it's not going to hold its value. Which will undermine the acceptability, right? Because people will become less and less willing to hold it, less and less willing to trade for it. So it all really goes toward the underlying function of reducing transactional friction. So really the worst thing you could do for money, or something that was attempting to become money, would be to increase transactional friction by, for example, hypothetical, some kind of arbitrary constraint on transactional capacity would be really bad. But obviously nobody would be crazy enough to do something like that. So what are the problems of conventional money? Well, basically, none of them solve both or satisfy both of those first two requirements. We don't have money that is both scarce and has low transactional friction, right? I mean, we have commodities like precious metals, which are reliably scarce, but certainly from a modern perspective, they're massively inefficient, right? I want to send a piece of little, yellow metal halfway across the world. There's massive expense, delay associated with that. So and then we have fiat currencies, which are relatively low transactional friction, but they're not reliably scarce. There's a central issuer. They have an incentive to arbitrarily expand the supply and siphon value away. Another way to think about the problem is just no conventional form of money allows you to both store and transfer value without the need for a trusted central intermediary, right? So, you can cash. Sure, you can transfer cash person to person, but you have to be in the same location, right? So you can't send dollars to someone elsewhere in the world without trusting a PayPal, a Western Union, a bank to facilitate that transfer. You can't hold, you can hold cash and think, oh, I'm not trusting that bank, but you are trusting the bank. You're trusting the central issuer not to, siphon or decrease the value of your money via arbitrary expansion. And then gold, yes, you can hold gold, trustlessly because there is nobody who can print it. But again, you can't send it certainly across distance without a trusted intermediary. And so, how does cryptocurrency solve those problems? How well? Pretty well, right? I mean, the value proposition of Bitcoin for me is that it combines the scarcity of a commodity like gold with the transactional efficiency of a purely digital medium, or to the second. Framing, it makes it possible to both store and transfer value, including across distance, without the need for a trusted central intermediary. So, scorecard. Use case number one. Size and importance of the problem. Money is pretty important. I mean, I think that's an understatement, right? And how big is the problem? I think from my perspective, conventional forms of money are all hugely flawed. So, I think that's a huge problem. How well does, cryptocurrency solve this problem? Well, at least potentially, if this thing works, right? I mean, we're still young, it's still an experiment, but potentially it's a really, really good solution to this huge problem. So, I gave it a use case score of 9 out of 10. I was going to give it a 10, but then I was like, well, I'm biased. I knocked a point off for balance. All right, so now we'll talk about the second use case, right? So we're talking about smart contracts. Talk about just contracts generally. So what is a contract? Well, it's usually defined like an agreement between two or more parties creating obligations that are legally enforceable. So it's an agreement, legally enforceable. What's the purpose? Well, so before talking about the purpose, we imagine a world where there are no contracts, okay? And let's say you're a sculptor, and I want to commission you to make me a really elaborate custom sculpture, of myself, like a solid marble, life size, because it would class up the house or the backyard. I mean, who knows, right? And you say, yeah, I could do that, but it would be, 20 grand. Haven't priced this out. I don't know if that's a reasonable price, but it'll take me a couple months. Sure, great, we shake hands. And then the sculptor says, okay, so just give me the money and I'll get started. And you go, well, no, I'm not going to just give you the money because you could just take it and run. You make this, the sculpture, and then I'll give you the money. And he says, well, no, because I'm not going to spend 2 months and all of this expensive material to create this custom piece that, no offense, doesn't really have a market other than you. Probably won't be able to sell it, right? So there's a trust problem, and maybe the deal can't happen. And this, again, we're in the world where there are no contracts because parties can't trust one another, and that's unfortunate because if we could trust one another, this would be a mutually beneficial exchange. So an alternative to reliance on contract could be reputation. So the sculptor says, well, I'm not going to take the money and run because I've built up this valuable reputation of honesty in my business, and if I did that, the word would get out that I'm a dishonest guy. I'd never get, I wouldn't get more business. So my reputation is much more valuable to me than this $20,000. And maybe that's enough. But alternatively, maybe the sculptor is sort of new and he hasn't really built up a reputation yet. Well, then I don't trust you, you don't trust me, but maybe we both trust this third party. So we say, well, how about this? I'll deposit the money when this third party, Edward E. Escrow, whom we both trust, and he'll verify to you that he's received the money, he's holding it, and then once you deliver the goods, you'll verify to him that you received the goods, and he'll pass the money along to me. Okay, so those are sort of the alternatives. Well, a contract, then we introduce the world of contract. So a contract is, how about we both write down this agreement, and we sign our names, and we both know, because of this, creation of the state, that if you try, one of us tries not to fulfill our obligations, the other will be able to take this piece of paper and go to the courthouse and say, hey, look, we have a contract, and present evidence. This guy hasn't fulfilled his obligations. Therefore, force him to make amends. And so, really, a contract is kind of I think of it as like a power escrow, because you don't necessarily depositing funds with the state, but you're sort of voluntarily depositing or vesting the state with this enforcement power. Because it only works if you both parties sort of trust, have some confidence in the state's enforcement apparatus, right? Okay, so what are the problems with contracts? What can go wrong? Well, so like I said, my background is as an attorney, and lots of things, turns out, can go wrong with contracts. So formation, meeting of the minds, right? So one of the problems is that people use language differently, and they have different mental models of the world. So even where parties think they've reached an agreement, yes, we shake hands, we're on the same page, they might actually have different ideas about what it is they've agreed to. And a related problem is they may just fail to contemplate a situation that arises, a contingency, and thus there really wasn't a meeting of the minds because their minds never envisioned this possibility. The second problem is capturing the agreement. So even if you have a meeting of the minds, you have one on the same page, it can be difficult to capture a drafted document that fully and unambiguously captures the agreement such that a third party, the third party arbiter, will be able to correctly interpret it and apply it in the event of dispute. Then you have to, even where you meet both of those, you accomplish both of those well. You reach an agreement, you capture in a well-drafted document. Disputes can still arise over whether or not there's been a breach, whether or not various contractual conditions have been satisfied. You say you delivered the 1,000 widgets by the June 1st deadline and they conform to the contract specification. I say, no, they were delivered 2 days late and they didn't conform to the specification because they had a mechanical failure rate of 4% when we agreed that the maximum was 2%. So there's just factual disputes about, did the conditions arise that would constitute a breach. And litigation is expensive and slow. So even where you have an agreement, you capture it in a well-drafted document, you have all of the evidence you need to prove you're in the right. If you're ultimately forced to actually litigate, the process is likely to be slow and expensive. Courts are fallible, so even if you have the agreement, evidence is great, you pay your attorney's fees and costs to litigate the case fully, you wait for the process to run its course, the court could still get it wrong, right? Because a judge or jury could be incompetent or corrupt or biased or whatever. And then finally, even if you do all of those things right in the event of a dispute, you get a judgment that says, hey, you were in the wrong, pay the other guy, right? There's no guarantee that you'll be able to collect it because the losing party may shelter their assets or they may simply not have assets sufficient to cover the judgment. All right. So smart contract, what is that? One sort of possibility that I sort of how to define that, is to say, well, it's instead of an legally enforceable agreement, it's an agreement that is intended to be enforceable automatically via code. Another sort of more generic proposed definition was a piece of code. And this is sort of specifically in the blockchain context. It's stored in the blockchain, you interact with it, you trigger it by blockchain transactions, and it reads and writes data in the blockchain's database. So then the question is, okay, how do we went through sort of the issues that can arise with contracts. How do smart contracts help with those issues? Well, meeting of the minds, right? I don't see how smart contracts really, overcome that fundamental problem, right? I thought, well, maybe in theory, the forced rigor of expressing your agreement in objective black and white code would ensure that the parties are on the same page or make it more likely, right? But the aspects of a contract that actually lend themselves to expression in objective black and white code are probably not the aspects that are likely to give rise to confusion. And B, the actual behavior of code is not necessarily easily predictable, right? So people claim that legalese is difficult to decipher, like, oh, what does this provision mean? When I look at it, and it's hard to know. But then most people maybe have an even harder time making sense of what this code is going to do. And again, sometimes it doesn't do what you thought it was going to do, right? Fully and accurately capturing the agreement. Yeah, again, I don't see how that really solves this kind of fundamental problem. Avoiding ambiguity and drafting errors, in a way it creates its own, maybe makes the problem worse, because drafting a piece of code that will cause a computer to behave in the predicted and desired manner is maybe even harder than drafting a legal document that would cause, a court to behave in the desired manner. Proving satisfaction of conditions, right? So presumably most contracts of interest in just general terms, right? They involve conditions that are dependent on some state of the world. Were the widgets delivered by the deadline? Did they conform to the specification? Did the NICs cover the spread, right? But blockchain-based smart contracts by design can only operate on what's contained in the blockchain, because they have to be determinate. The computation of the contract has to be deterministic. You have to be confident that all nodes are going to agree. So how do you get data about the external world into the blockchain? Well, it seems to me that practically speaking, it's the reliance on a trusted third-party oracle. But then, so you can have. I'm not sure how that makes proving certain relevant facts easier. You can assign this guy to be the oracle of did the widgets get delivered, but you maybe still have to prove to him, to whoever is the sort of that key holder, whether or not that condition was satisfied. What about the expense and delay associated with the dispute resolution process? Maybe, right? So can you avoid the expense and delay of litigation using a smart contract? So my widget seller example. So maybe they say, okay, we agree to deliver widgets to a buyer by a certain date, and they say, let's do this with a smart contract. Maybe not the best use case of smart contracts, but so to get information about whether or not these goods are delivered, they presumably need to appoint someone as an oracle. And maybe they sign a legal agreement that says, look, we agree that they sign some separate legal agreement that says, look, we agree that our relationship is defined exclusively by the smart contract, the blockchain rules. Even if we're not satisfied, we're gonna let it govern. But then maybe there's a bug and somebody is unhappy and like, hey, that wasn't our intended behavior of the code. So can they sue? Well, you can always file a lawsuit, right? The question is, would a court necessarily go, well, you said that this would be handled by the blockchain, so I don't, would they kick it based on your agreement that the blockchain governs? Maybe. I mean, it's sort of like the analogy I think is like binding arbitration clauses, where you say, hey, we agree not to sue, or if we're not to sue in sort of the court system, we agree that our disputes will be resolved via binding arbitration, which are usually, at least in the U.S., are upheld generally. Okay, so that avoids litigation maybe, but you still, I mean, again, this silly example, like you still have to, if there's a dispute, you still potentially have to present evidence, a proof to the fact finder, right? Because there is still this, there is in this example, this oracle that has to ultimately sort of be the arbiter. All right, what about the honesty, competence of the fact finder? So maybe, yeah, I mean, I guess yes and no that smart contracts help here, right? I mean, so presumably the whole idea of a decentralized network is that it's going to be more reliable and objective, right? It will probably enforce your code exactly as written, unless you're, too big to fail. Certain example comes to mind. But, all right, that can be either good or bad from your perspective. So if there's a bug in the code that's discovered, that clearly unintentional behavior, the network will probably going to run the code exactly as written. Whereas a court typically will try to interpret a contract in a way that doesn't lead to an absurd result, right? So my suspicion is that the risk of, losing big because of a bug is probably greater than the typical risk that you'll lose big with a judge that refuses to properly apply a truly unambiguous agreement. But I mean, it's sort of just there's just unavoidable risk there. And again, to the extent that you have to rely on a trusted oracle, there's still this risk that the oracle will be compromised, incompetent or corrupt, and get it wrong. Collecting on a judgment. So yes, smart contracts seem to help, but only via forced funds escrow, right? Because in order for the smart contract to enforce a payment obligation, I mean, the funds to satisfy that had to be encumbered and sort of put under the control of the contract. So it's basically, you have to essentially put the funds into escrow. So scorecard, use case number 2. And all right, so one point I'll say is that, so I think maybe some people will think that I've missed the point of smart contracts when I'm giving these examples of like the widgets, and they're saying, hey, smart contracts aren't supposed to be a universal solution to every situation where you might use a contract. They have certain use cases that they're really suited for, like certain kinds of financial instruments. And that's probably right, but I think that also is kind of making my point, which is that smart contracts aren't, or don't seem to be, a general solution to the problem of contracts, whereas, blockchains, cryptocurrency arguably is a general solution to the sort of the entire problem of money. So, size and importance of the problem. I think contracts are important. They're very important. They're real problems, but I don't think the problem of contracts is nearly as big as the problem of money, right? Because money and contracts are both tools for reducing transactional friction. But I think that money is the more foundational tool, right? And that's pretty much involved in any market exchange, whereas contracts, I think, and there aren't really good substitutes to money. Whereas I think contracts are only really important for a subset of market exchanges, and there arguably are, already decent substitutes. So how well does blockchain technology solve the problems of contracts? It seems like maybe again, it's not a general solution, a complete solution to the problem of contracts. There may be compelling use cases, but it seems to me like you with a smart contract, you get this decentralized, presumably trustworthy network to act as escrow for funds and independently verify the aspects of agreement that lend themselves to representation in black and white code. But that, to me, those aspects of an agreement that lend themselves to sort of this clear deterministic behavior aren't really the pain point of contracts. That sort of seems like the least likely aspect of a contract to cause a problem. So I'm just not sure that it's. Like I said, I'm sure there are compelling use cases, but it doesn't seem to solve sort of the general problems of contracts as nearly as well as blockchain technology. Bitcoin seems to potentially solve the problems of money. So I gave a use case score of 2.7, and I don't have the time to describe my methodology, but it was very rigorous. All right, so possible implications. Well, you have this quote: "Complexity is the enemy of security." So, one potential, to me, it seems like, it may not make sense to add advanced. We may not want this, advanced smart contract functionality to live in the base protocol, right? Because it seems like if you're potentially adding features to facilitate a marginal use case at the potential expense of undermining the reliability of the dominant and much more important use case. So then maybe if they shouldn't live in the the base protocol, if like the Bitcoin blockchain, for example, should just be money, then maybe this type of functionality would be more appropriately implemented on sort of a layer above the base protocol. So that concludes my presentation. Anybody have any questions?
No questions? Oh, questions. Okay.
Wow, a lot of hands.
And before we start, I'm just going to say this is technically the start of lunch, but we have till 2:10. So if you want to leave, just kind of leave quietly, and we'll just get through the questions as long as they go. Who's raising their hand? Oh, there you go.
I think it's clear you don't see much of a role for the smart contracts. Do you also not see a role for the smart contracts for contracts of a lower value?
I guess I would need to sort of see the use case and think through what is that provide. Potentially, it's just, I would wonder if it's a lower value, if you couldn't have a reputation-based system where, it depends. And like I said, it's a question of not saying that there isn't a use case for smart contracts. It's a question of how important is that use case. Is it so important that it should be, baked into the protocol? And to the extent that facilitating smart contracts requires adding complexity, adding changes, I'm just not sure that makes sense. It's just, and this is not a conclusion that I'm wedded to, but it's more of just sort of a framework for people to kind of think about that issue of balancing these trade-offs.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you for your talk. I think you underestimate the power of smart contracts quite a bit. I believe code is law, also in I think law is very complex as well, and I think code can be more transparent and more feasible. But your point you're making that Bitcoin should focus on money, and maybe other chains can focus on the smart contract function. I think that's great. But why do you value smart contracts so low? I think it can change law for. I don't really understand your.
I don't know how to. I don't know that like I said, I don't know that I do. I think what I tried to show is that smart contracts, and in a way, it's like the problem is almost the terminology. Is like, because people, you hear smart contracts, you immediately think of contracts, and maybe there are use cases for smart contracts where the analog really isn't a contract. But as best I can tell, it doesn't seem to be a general solution to the problems that I see. As an attorney, with where do things go wrong, I don't see them as a panacea that certainly fixes. Oh yeah, this fixes this issue, fixes this issue. I'm open to the possibility that I'm wrong and that there are really compelling use cases, but I don't know that I've seen them demonstrated. I think that's something they've got to. We'll certainly see. We'll see that play out, and we'll see. I'm sure some use cases will fail and some maybe will be successful, but it's hard to know now what those are going to be.
That's true. I agree, but then it's also not really. It doesn't make sense to make it give it a 2.7 on a scale of 10.
I don't have time to go into the methodology, but.
Okay, we can talk about it later.
All right.
All right.
Hi, great talk. I'm just kind of disagree with your reasoning for to what extent smart contracts are a valuable alternative to regular contracts, especially on the meeting of mind issue. I can see where you're coming from as a lawyer. However, me as a programmer actually think the opposite. I think code, or more basically just mathematics, clearly, undisputably, unarguably, unambiguously, exactly define the rules of engagement. Yeah, and sure. The more complex things get, the more thinking we have to put in it. But it really, really solves this problem very well.
I think so. I think it probably does. Like I said, if you're creating a financial instrument, or if you're creating something that kind of naturally lives on the chain because you're using smart contracts to assign voting rights or assign, payment obligations of 2% interest or whatever. Yes, I think that for those things that naturally live on the chain, there's certain things that absolutely it should be much more unambiguous how the rules apply. But again, to the extent that you try to codify, things that leak out into the real world of, I don't know that you can code up the widgets conforming to specification in an unambiguous way. So I think there are probably use cases where smart contracts, there is a real benefit to the objective black and white code. But like I said, my point is really just it's not a global solution to the problem of contracts.
Sure, no, I agree.
All right. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. I realize we're having a lunch talk downstairs, so I think you can make it really quick? Yeah, really. Okay, and then we'll hear talk from someone from SBI Bits downstairs.
Could I get your comment on the niche where two or more parties couldn't be bound to a contract because of different jurisdictions?
I don't know that that's the case, right? There's certainly international contracts. I mean, there may be use cases where, for whatever reason, they can't rely on the traditional legal system. But again, even there's still alternatives of reputation and repeat players of, you know, if you breach your agreements, you get a reputation as somebody that other people or the same person doesn't want to do business with. So there's already, I think, you know, the fact is most contracts aren't litigated, right? I mean, they're very, very few end up in court because, and to some extent it's because people know, well, oh geez, if I breach, I'm risking a lawsuit. But I think a real extent, it's really because most people want to honor their agreements and understand that value of sort of being known as an honest player.
Oh, thank you.